welcome back. If you're here, you know the deal. Get comfortable. Pull that blanket a little tighter. Let the light go low. Tonight we're going somewhere very familiar. A place you've visited 100 times in your mind and probably far too many times on your screen at 2 inches the morning. Tonight we're talking about Rick and Morty. 300 facts, delivered slow and easy, the way a quiet voice carries through an empty house at night. There's no rush. Nowhere to be. Just you, the dark, and 300 little pieces of a show that somehow crawled into the bones of an entire generation. Let's begin. Part 1. In the beginning, how Rick and Morty came to exist. To understand anything about Rick and Morty, you have to go back to a room full of people watching short films on a screen, laughing at things they probably shouldn't have been laughing at. That room was Channel 101, a monthly film festival held in Los Angeles. It was the kind of place where weird ideas got their first breath of air, and where two people who would change adult animation forever first crossed paths. Fact 1. Rick and Morty was created by Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon. They first met at Channel 101, a non-profit short film festival in Los Angeles co-founded by Harmon. It's a place where anyone could submit a short pilot, and a live audience would vote to keep it going or let it die. That casual creative arena is where the seeds of the whole thing were planted. Fact 2. Roiland started attending Channel 101 around 2004. He was working as a producer on reality programming at the time, which he found stifling. Channel 101 was where he could be genuinely, defiantly weird. His work there was described, in his own words, as sick and twisted. The audience didn't always know what to make of it. Harmon did. Fact 3. The direct ancestor of Rick and Morty was a short film Roiland made in 2006 called The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty. It was a crude, deliberately offensive parody of Back to the Future, featuring characters who were clearly stand-ins for Doc Brown and Marty McFly. The Marty spelling was a thin disguise. The humor was intentionally shocking. It was the germ cell of something that would eventually become one of the most celebrated animated series in television history. Fact 4. The original short was actually created as a kind of rebellious act. Roiland said he made it partly out of spite for the kind of corporate notes and creative limitations he kept running into in the industry. Channel 101 was a space where nobody could tell him what to do, and Doc and Marty was his expression of that freedom. Which is quietly appropriate, given how much Rick Sanchez himself hates being told what to do. Fact 5. Roiland created nearly 15 minutes worth of shorts featuring the Doc and Marty characters. These were never intended to become a full show. They were experimental, funny in a dark way, and very rough around the edges. But there was something alive in them that Harmon recognized immediately. Fact 6. Before Rick and Morty, Roiland made another Channel 101 production called House of Cosbys, which also starred Harmon as a voice actor. That show ended when Roiland received a cease and desist letter from Bill Cosby's legal team. In retrospect, that show's premature end pushed Roiland's creative energy directly toward what would become Rick and Morty. Fact 7. Dan Harmon, in the years before Rick and Morty, was best known as the creator of Community, the NBC sitcom that developed a passionate cult following for its meta-humor and deep storytelling. Community gave Harmon a reputation as someone who understood narrative structure at a level most television writers don't operate at. When Adult Swim came calling, Harmon was fresh off being briefly fired from his own show. That displacement gave him space to think about something new. Fact 8. In 2012, Adult Swim approached Harmon to produce a new animated series. Harmon was hesitant. He didn't think of himself as an animation person. His creative process was built around dialogue and character, not the particular demands of the animated format. So he called Roiland, who jumped at the chance. Fact 9. Roiland had just come off 3 failed animated pilots for Fox. He was hungry and ready to try something that felt more genuinely him. The moment Harmon called, Roiland brought up the Doc and Marty concept. They renamed the characters Rick and Morty and began building a family around them, which was Harmon's idea. Adult Swim development executive Nick Weidenfeld suggested that Rick should specifically be Morty's grandfather, which fundamentally changed the dynamic in a way that made everything else work. Fact 10. The first draft of the Rick and Morty pilot was completed in just 6 hours, written at the Paramount Pictures lot in Dan Harmon's office from Community, which was mostly unfurnished at the time. 6 hours for the foundation of a show that would go on to win Emmy Awards and reshape adult animation. That's a strange and beautiful fact to sit with. Fact 11. Adult Swim initially ordered the show with a TV-14 rating, which was tamer than usual for the network's nighttime block. The reason was that Adult Swim was planning to move some programming into primetime and wanted to compete with major broadcast networks. The show's staff pushed back, and later episodes would receive TVMA ratings. The first episode to receive a TVMA rating was Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate in Season 2. Fact 12. The show premiered on the 2nd of December 2013. In the very beginning, Adult Swim was uncertain about whether Roiland could carry both lead voices. Morty in particular felt underdeveloped in the early stages. Harmon wrote 4 short premises, in which Morty took a more assertive role, and sent them to Adult Swim programming chief Mike Lazo to demonstrate what the character could be. It worked, and Roiland's dual voicing was approved. Fact 13. The theme song for Rick and Morty was composed by Ryan Elder. But here's the part most people don't know. The theme was not written for Rick and Morty. It was originally created for a rejected Cartoon Network pilot that Roiland had made called Dog World. That pilot never aired. The music was just sitting there. When it was repurposed for Rick and Morty, it fit so perfectly that there was never a reason to commission something new. The episode Lawnmower Dog even references Dog World directly as a kind of quiet wink. Fact 14. Dan Harmon is the voice of Bird Person. If you've listened to Bird Person and always had a nagging feeling that voice was familiar, that's why. Harmon stepped in to voice his own character, and given how central Bird Person becomes to the show's emotional core, there's something poetic about the co-creator lending his voice to the character who most consistently tells Rick the things he needs to hear. Fact 15. Roiland's approach to voicing both Rick and Morty was heavily improvisational. He would record dialogue with a considerable amount of unscripted material, riffing on top of the written lines to make the characters feel more natural and alive. A lot of the actual rambling, the stuttering, the mid-sentence changes in direction, those weren't in the script. That was Roiland in a room, following the character wherever it wanted to go. Fact 16. The name Rick for the main character carries deliberate weight. Rick is a blunt, simple, old-fashioned name that sits in contrast to the godlike intelligence of the character. It's the name of someone who fixes your furnace or coaches Little League, placed on the smartest being in the multiverse. That contrast is part of what makes him feel both awe-inspiring and deeply human. Fact 17. The number C137 attached to the main Rick's dimension is not arbitrary. The number 137 has deep significance in physics. It is the approximate value of the fine structure constant, a fundamental dimensionless physical constant that describes the strength of electromagnetic interaction between charged particles. Physicists have long considered it a mysterious and important number. Its presence in Rick's designation feels like a small, quiet nod to real science buried in the show's DNA. Fact 18. Roiland's burp-talking style for Rick was not originally planned as a permanent character trait. It evolved from the improvisational recordings and became a defining element of the character. Interestingly, some critics traced a similar speaking style to comedian Foster Brooks, who was known for his drunk character impressions in the 1970s. Roiland has mentioned Brooks as one of the influences that informed Rick's vocal quality. Fact 19. Before the show launched, there was genuine debate inside Adult Swim about whether the show would find an audience. The premise was unusual. The animation style was deceptively simple. The humor was dark, in ways that risked alienating people. None of the hand-wringing mattered. By the end of Season 1, Rick and Morty was Adult Swim's biggest thing. Fact 20. In May 2018, Adult Swim announced a long-term deal ordering 70 new episodes of Rick and Morty. That deal, confirmed after Harmon and Roiland came to an agreement, essentially secured the show's future through at least a 10th season. At a New York Comic-Con panel in 2024, the show was further renewed through a 12th season, with 20 additional episodes ordered beyond the original 70-episode deal. As of July 2025, with Season 8 completed, the show has aired 81 total episodes. Fact 21. Season 8 of Rick and Morty premiered on the 25th of May 2025. The first episode was titled Summer of All Fears. The season features Danny DeVito as a guest voice, as Dr. Dogballs. The season continues the story threads woven through the post-Roiland era, with Ian Cardoni and Harry Belden firmly established as the voices of Rick and Morty. Fact 22. Rick and Morty Season 9 is set to premiere on the 24th of May 2026, continuing the show's pattern of annual spring or summer releases that began with Season 7. Fact 23. The show has been cited as a cross between The Simpsons and Futurama by Dan Harmon himself, who described it that way in multiple interviews. The Simpsons provides the grounded family drama and suburban setting. Futurama provides the science fiction and existential scope. But the darkness running underneath Rick and Morty, the nihilism and grief that occasionally surfaces through the comedy, belongs entirely to the show itself. Fact 24. Some of Roiland's cited influences for his humor and animation style include The Simpsons, The Ren and Stimpy Show, Beavis and Butthead, and Invader Zim. You can feel all of those shows in Rick and Morty if you look for them. The casual cruelty, the surreal visual gags, the willingness to linger in discomfort, all of it has roots in that lineage. Fact 25. For Harmon, the show drew from sources like Saturday Night Live, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Doctor Who, and the cult science fiction film Zardos. That last one, a deeply strange 1974 Sean Connery film involving a flying stone head that dispenses weapons, explains something about the show's willingness to be unapologetically weird without needing to explain itself. Fact 26. Dan Harmon developed what he calls the story circle, a narrative structure based loosely on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's an 8-step framework that he used extensively in Community and brought with him to Rick and Morty. The story circle is one reason the show's episodes feel structurally satisfying, even when they're narratively absurd. The form holds the chaos in place. Fact 27. Chris Parnell, who voices Jerry Smith, is widely known for his work on Saturday Night Live and on Archer, where he voices the perpetually put-upon Cyril Figgis. The fact that he also voices Jerry, another perpetually put-upon man who is never quite respected by the world around him, has been noted by fans as a particularly appropriate piece of casting. Fact 28. Spencer Grammer, who voices Summer, is the daughter of Kelsey Grammer, who starred in Cheers and Frasier for decades. Spencer began as a child actor on Cheers, which means she has been in front of cameras and microphones for most of her life. Her delivery of Summer's sharp observations and teenage frustration carries a natural authority. Fact 29. Sarah Chalk, who voices Beth, is best known for her role as Dr. Elliot Reed in Scrubs. Her ability to blend vulnerability with a kind of fragile arrogance maps perfectly onto Beth Smith, who is often the most quietly tragic character in the room. Fact 30. The original short, The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty, remains available to watch online and is an interesting artifact for fans of the show. The characters are recognizable in outline. The humor is much more raw. And the whole thing has the energy of something made in an afternoon by someone who had nothing to lose. Which, of course, is exactly what it was. Part 2. The characters, everything you didn't know. Characters are the beating heart of any story, and the characters of Rick and Morty are among the most carefully constructed in animated television. Every personality quirk, every recurring behavior, every small detail about how these people look and move carries meaning. Let's go through them slowly. Fact 31. Rick Sanchez's design was specifically intended to look both impressive and slightly disheveled. The character art guidelines for the show, discussed by art director Jeffrey Thompson during Season 3, instruct that characters be drawn with odd or asymmetrical features to avoid looking too normal to live in the Rick and Morty universe. Rick's hair, the way it sweeps back in a way that suggests both a mad scientist and someone who simply doesn't care enough to brush it, is part of this deliberate aesthetic. Fact 32. Rick's habit of constantly having what appears to be a drool or liquid on his chin was intentional from the early designs. It became a signature part of his look that connected him to the original Doc and Marty character, reinforcing that Rick is not entirely put together no matter how brilliant he is. He is simultaneously the most capable being in the universe, and someone who doesn't quite manage basic self-care. Fact 33. The character of Morty was designed to be somewhat universally relatable in terms of appearance. He's a round-faced, slightly awkward kid with no particularly distinguishing features. That plainness was intentional. Morty is meant to be the audience surrogate, the person the viewer inhabits as Rick drags them through the impossible. Making him too distinctive or cool would have broken that identification. Fact 34. Morty's yellow shirt is a conscious echo of Bart Simpson's red shirt. Both are the first visual cue that this is an animated kid who is going to be in situations children shouldn't be in. The color choice creates an immediate subconscious link to decades of animated mischief that predates the show. Fact 35. Jerry Smith's character was described by the writers as being inspired partly by a particular fear Dan Harmon had about himself. Harmon has spoken openly about his struggles with ego, substance use, and maintaining relationships, and Jerry represents a version of those anxieties in their most stripped-down, vulnerable form. Jerry is what happens when self-doubt never gets resolved, only performed. Fact 36. Beth Smith was given a horse surgeon career rather than a human surgeon career specifically to comment on the smallness of her life relative to her potential. She went to school and trained for surgery, but the word horse in her title diminishes it in a way that everyone in the show feels and never quite says. It is one of the subtlest pieces of character work in the whole series. Fact 37. Summer Smith was not originally intended to be a major character. In early development, she was conceived as the older sibling who stays home while adventures happen around her. The show's writers gradually recognized that the dynamic of Summer being excluded was more interesting than her being absent, and she was worked into more storylines as the seasons progressed. Fact 38. Mr. Meeseeks, one of the most beloved one-off creations in the show's history, was conceived as a thought experiment about purpose and existence. The writers asked, what if you created a being whose only reason for living was to complete a task? The answer, as the show demonstrates, is both hilarious and genuinely disturbing. The episode featuring Mr. Meeseeks, and Destroy from Season 1, contains one of the show's most surprising emotional pivots when we briefly enter a fairy tale world with Morty, and the tone shifts in a way the audience is not prepared for. Fact 39. The character of Evil Morty was introduced in Season 1 as what appeared to be a background plot twist. His reappearance across multiple seasons revealed a long-game narrative ambition that most animated shows don't attempt. The revelation of Evil Morty's full plan across Seasons 5 and 6 constitutes one of the most satisfying villain arcs in the history of adult animation. Fact 40. Bird Person, whose civilian name is revealed to be Phoenix Person after his transformation, was originally intended as a straightforward tough friend from Rick's past. He grew into something far more important because every time the writers brought him back, they found new emotional depth in him. His wedding episode is still considered by many fans to be one of the most tonally perfect things the show ever did. Comedy and genuine heartbreak woven together so tightly, you can't separate them. Fact 41. Tammy Guterman, the character who marries Bird Person and is revealed as a Galactic Federation spy, started as a high school friend of Summer's. She appeared casually in early episodes before her role was quietly expanded into something that would have enormous consequences. The writers planted her early enough that her betrayal, in retrospect, feels both shocking and inevitable. Fact 42. Unity, the hive mind entity that Rick has a romantic relationship with in Season 2's autoerotic assimilation, was described by the writers as representing Rick's ideal relationship and why he can't have it. Unity can become everything Rick wants, shape itself perfectly to his needs, and is still not enough to make Rick willing to change. The ending of that episode, in which Rick attempts and fails to take his own life after Unity leaves, is one of the rawest moments in the show's run. Fact 43. Mr. Poopy Butthole, despite the juvenile name, is one of the show's most emotionally complex characters. He was introduced in the Season 2 episode Total Rickle as part of a Parasite storyline, and his function in that episode is to make viewers question whether he is real or invented. His survival of being shot by Beth and his subsequent appearances tracking his difficult recovery over several seasons give him an ongoing arc that most supporting characters in animated shows never receive. Fact 44. The space cruiser, Rick's flying car, has a voice and an artificial intelligence. That AI was eventually revealed in Season 7 to be called Diane, based on Rick's deceased wife Diane. Rick built the AI of his dead wife into the machine he uses every day for every adventure. That single detail, delivered quietly without fanfare, says more about Rick's grief than any number of explicit conversations about it. Fact 45. Jessica, the girl Morty has a long-standing crush on throughout the series, was voiced by Kari Wahlgren, a prolific voice actress with credits in anime, American animation, and video games. Jessica was initially a background figure representing Morty's normal teenage desires. By season 7, after traveling through a series of increasingly strange circumstances, she becomes something significantly more cosmically significant. Fact 46. President Morty, the character at the end of Season 1's Close Rick, Counters of the Rick kind, was not originally planned to become the show's deepest villain. The writers enjoyed the twist of a Morty being the one running things so much that they kept building on it. Evil Morty's full arc, from that first episode to the Season 5 finale, was one of the most ambitious narrative projects in the show's history. Fact 47. The character of Dr. Wong, the Smith family therapist, voiced by Susan Sarandon, was introduced in Pickle Rick to deliver the episode's thematic payload. Her 2 scenes in that episode contain some of the sharpest psychological observation in the show's run. Her observation that Rick's intelligence is a mechanism for avoiding the hard work of being a person functions almost like a key that unlocks the entire character. Sarandon's calm, direct delivery makes the scene land as something more than a comedy beat. Fact 48. Squanchy, Rick's small feline alien friend, was voiced by Tom Kenny, best known as the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants. Something about knowing that the voice behind one of animation's most beloved gentle characters is also providing the voice of a chaotic, reckless party creature is quietly delightful. Fact 49. Gazorpazorp, the alien world visited in Raising Gazorpazorp, is home to a species divided entirely by gender into a passive, pampered leisure class of men and a warrior class of women who run everything. It was written as a comedic commentary on gender dynamics and society, and it remains one of Season 1's most discussed episodes. Fact 50. Scary Terry, the Freddy Krueger parody from Lawnmower Dog, was designed to have a deeply troubled inner life hidden beneath his terrifying exterior. The fact that his anxiety dreams are about not being scary enough, about failing at the one thing he's supposed to be, made him unexpectedly resonant for viewers who recognize that particular fear in themselves. Fact 51. The Vindicators, the superhero parody team from Season 3, were written as a satire of superhero teams and ensemble adventure narratives. The episode, Vindicators 3. The Return of Worldender works as both a parody and a character study of Rick, revealing that his trap house left for the Vindicators was actually built during a blackout, suggesting that Rick's unconscious mind operates at the same genius level as his conscious one. Fact 52. Noob Noob, the lowest-ranking Vindicator who mostly cleans up messes, became a fan-favorite character after the Season 3 episode. Rick, who deeply despises the other Vindicators, genuinely likes Noob Noob. The show uses that small detail to say something about how Rick's affections are unpredictable and often go to the people the world overlooks. Fact 53. Beth's clone, Space Beth, introduced in Season 4, complicated the show's treatment of Beth in fascinating ways. The reveal that neither Beth nor her clone knows which one is the original, and that Rick deliberately made the situation ambiguous, raises questions about identity and authenticity that the show continues to explore through the later seasons. Fact 54. Rick C-137 refers to himself, and is referred to by others by his dimension designation, more than almost any other Rick variant. The reason is that C-137 has a reputation, a history of violence and defiance against every institution in the multiverse that precedes him. When other Ricks hear C-137, they understand that this particular version is not to be underestimated or crossed. Fact 55. Morty's full name, Mortimer Smith, is almost never used in the show. Morty prefers to be Morty, which itself feels significant. In a universe where Rick's full Spanish name, Ricardo Sanchez, carries a kind of formal weight, Morty's preference for his nickname reflects his consistent desire to be seen as a regular person rather than a label. Fact 56. The design of Rick's portal gun, the small green handheld device that is essentially the literal key to the show's premise, went through multiple iterations before settling on its final form. It needed to look impressive enough to explain why Rick is uniquely powerful, and simple enough to feel like something he could have built in a garage. The final design threads that needle beautifully. Fact 57. Jerry's occupation for most of the show's early run is in advertising, a field the show treats as meaninglessly frivolous. His eventual job losses and career changes throughout the seasons reflect the broader theme of Jerry's inability to build anything stable from the material of his life. Fact 58. Summer's choice to involve herself in Rick's adventures, despite not being Rick's designated sidekick, is driven by a combination of genuine courage and the desperate need to prove she belongs. The show rewards that persistence by making her, in many episodes, more capable of handling interdimensional chaos than Morty. Fact 59. Rick's relationship with his dog Snuffles, from the Season 1 episode Lawnmower Dog, is one of the show's most bittersweet small arcs. Snuffles is given a brain enhancement device and becomes extraordinarily intelligent, eventually developing a full society of intelligent dogs. The episode treats this as comedy, but Snuffles' quiet grief at the end of his storyline, choosing to return to a simpler life, carries an emotional resonance the show doesn't always stop to acknowledge. Fact 60. The character of Aberdolf Linkler, who appears in a single episode, is literally a genetic hybrid of Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler, created by Rick as a morally neutral super leader. He appears at a party Morty throws and disappears into the chaos, his fate unresolved. He returned in non-canonical shorts and comics, but his main continuity appearance remains a single-episode curiosity that the show never found the time to revisit. Fact 61. Rick Sanchez is coded as having a very specific kind of intelligence that the show distinguishes from book learning or academic knowledge. Rick doesn't need institutions. He doesn't need peer review. His relationship with knowledge is direct and personal in a way that mirrors his relationship with everything else, entirely on his own terms. Fact 62. Morty's age, 14, is consistent across the show and important to understand what the show is actually doing. Every traumatic experience, every brush with death, every dimension-hopping adventure happens to a 14-year-old boy. The show never lets you forget this, and the accumulating weight of it on the character is one of the show's most consistent dramatic threads. Fact 63. Beth's surgical skills, which she mentions throughout the show, occasionally come in handy in unexpected ways. There's something quietly satisfying about the show, allowing the character who is most often underestimated within her own family to have a practical competence that saves situations no one else could. Fact 64. Jerry's friendship with Morty, which is genuine and uncomplicated in a way that few relationships in the show are, functions as a kind of anchor. Both of them are treated as the least important people in their respective contexts. Their alliance, such as it is built on shared outsider status and mutual affection that neither of them overthinks. Fact 65. Rick's drinking, which is constant and visible in nearly every episode, is not played purely for laughs. The writers have been explicit about the fact that it represents a specific kind of self-destruction, and that it is connected to his grief. A Rick who had never lost Diane might still drink, but the show wants you to understand that the degree to which he drinks now is a wound expressing itself. Fact 66. Bird Person's name comes with its own slight comedy. He is literally a person who is a bird. The show could have given him a more exotic alien name and chose not to. This reflects the show's tendency to name things with unnerving bluntness when it wants to make a point. Fact 67. The Plutonians encountered in Season 1 were included partly as a joke about the 2006 decision by the International Astronomical Union to reclassify Pluto as a dwarf planet rather than a full planet. The Plutonians' wounded pride at being considered lesser is a wry commentary on how much that decision still stings for people who grew up calling Pluto the ninth planet. Fact 68. Tony, the man who lives inside Rick's body in the Season 4 episode One Crew Over the Cuckoo's Morty. Actually, let me correct this fact. The show contains a recurring theme of tiny civilizations or beings existing inside larger ones, from the microverse battery in the Ricks Must Be Crazy to the parasites in Total Rickle. This idea of nested existences, one universe unaware it is inside another, is one of the show's recurring philosophical obsessions. Fact 69. Rick has mentioned that he considers his burp a side effect of the chemicals he uses in his lab and the volume of alcohol he consumes. Whether this is true within the fiction of the show or simply a characteristic the writers built around Roiland's improv style is something the show treats with wonderful ambiguity. Fact 70. The Smith family home, located in the fictional town of Seattle, Washington, is positioned in a completely ordinary, middle-class suburban setting. The banality of the setting is entirely intentional. The contrast between the cosmic impossibility of what Rick does and the utterly ordinary surroundings from which he launches into the multiverse is the show's central visual joke, and it never stops being funny. Part 3. The science behind the show. Rick and Morty was described by Adult Swim, in a YouTube channel description, as its most scientifically accurate animated comedy. That's marketing, of course, but it points towards something real. The show has a genuine relationship with physics, biology, and philosophy that sets it apart from most science fiction. Fact 71. The central premise of the show, interdimensional travel between parallel universes, is rooted in a real scientific theory, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This theory was first proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. It suggests that every quantum event causes reality to split into branching paths where all possible outcomes exist simultaneously. Every time a particle can go one way or another, reality bifurcates and both outcomes occur in parallel universes that can't communicate with each other. Fact 72. The problem with Rick's portal gun, from a strictly scientific standpoint, is precisely that communication and travel between those branching realities is considered impossible under the many worlds interpretation. The reason is a process called quantum decoherence. Once a possible world is realized, it essentially disconnects from the rest of the quantum wave function. You can't re-access it. Rick's portal gun elegantly ignores this constraint, which is what makes it science fiction rather than science fact. Fact 73. The Season 2 premiere, A Wrinkle in Time, is based on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. That principle, from quantum mechanics, states that you cannot simultaneously know the exact position and exact speed of a particle. The episode translates this into the premise that Rick, Morty, and Summer, removed from time, find that their uncertainty about what to do next physically splits reality into multiple, simultaneous versions of themselves. Fact 74. Physicists who have commented on the show have noted that the portrayal of the multiverse is technically inaccurate, but philosophically engaging. The number of possible universes predicted by string theory is roughly 1 followed by 500 zeros. That is a bigger number than the number of ways you could rearrange every atom on Earth. But it is still not infinite. Rick and Morty's infinite multiverse takes the concept further than the physics technically supports. Fact 75. However, some versions of multiverse theory do suggest infinite copies of reality. In the quilted multiverse concept described by physicist Brian Greene, if spacetime is infinite and matter is finite, the finite arrangement of particles will eventually repeat. Greene has suggested this leads to an infinite number of copies of everything, including you. Every single choice you've made plays out in another version of reality somewhere. Rick and Morty takes this idea and turns it into its entire playground. Fact 76. The episode Rick Potion Number 9, in which a love potion gone wrong causes the population to mutate through several increasingly disturbing stages, is loosely grounded in real biology. Viruses do hijack cellular machinery to replicate themselves. The idea of a modified virus carrying a chemical compound that alters behavior or biology is not science fiction. It is an active area of research in gene therapy and neuroscience. Rick's approach is comically accelerated, but the underlying mechanism is real. Fact 77. The Cronenberg monsters, from that same episode, named after horror film director David Cronenberg, are a specific visual callback to Cronenberg's body horror films, in which human bodies undergo grotesque, fleshy transformations. Cronenberg himself later appeared in a Season 4 episode, voicing a character who exists in a dimension where Rick's love potion experiment went the other way, producing a world where everyone looks normal except for the Sanchez family. Fact 78. The microverse battery from Season 2's The Ricks Must Be Crazy is based on a philosophical concept sometimes called the simulation hypothesis. Rick has created an entire universe inhabited by intelligent beings, who have no idea they exist inside a battery powering Rick's car. The show uses this as a metaphor for exploitation and the indifference of more powerful beings to those below them. The episode even introduces a character from inside the microverse who is also building his own universe, nesting the concept recursively. Fact 79. The simulation hypothesis, which the microverse battery plays with, is a real philosophical and scientific proposition, most famously articulated by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. Bostrom's argument suggests that it is statistically likely that we are living inside a computer simulation. Rick and Morty doesn't engage with Bostrom directly, but the show clearly has this idea in its peripheral vision throughout its run. Fact 80. Schrödinger's cat, the famous thought experiment about a cat in a box that is simultaneously alive and dead until the box is opened, is referenced in Season 1 when Rick and Morty float through space surrounded by cats. The visual reference is to the paradox that the cat's state is undefined until observed. The show uses this kind of scientific shorthand regularly, trusting its audience to make the connection. Fact 81. The central finite curve, introduced in Season 5, is one of the show's most ambitious, science-adjacent concepts. It is a barrier separating dimensions where Rick is the smartest person in the universe, from dimensions where he is not. This wall around a section of infinite reality ensures that in every universe Rick can access, he is at the top of the intellectual food chain. As a piece of world building, it's elegant. As a metaphor for how power protects itself, it's sharp. Fact 82. The Omega device, introduced in Season 6, is a weapon capable of erasing a person from every dimension simultaneously. Rick Prime used it on Diane Sanchez, which is why no version of Diane appears in any dimension Rick visits. The concept draws on many worlds theory in reverse. Rather than a branching proliferation of outcomes, the device collapses all versions of a person into non-existence across every branch simultaneously. Fact 83. The show's treatment of time travel is notably cautious. The creators have expressed a general dislike of time travel as a narrative device, largely because it creates logical paradoxes that stories struggle to resolve cleanly. In Rick's garage, there is a box labeled "Time Travel Stuff" that has been pushed to the back and essentially shelved. This is the show's way of winking at the audience. We see the concept, we acknowledge it, and we're deliberately leaving it alone. Fact 84. The episode A Wrinkle in Time is actually an exception to this aversion to time travel. But the writers were careful to frame the time disruption as a consequence of freezing time rather than traveling through it. It's a subtle distinction that lets the show engage with temporal mechanics without fully opening the paradox box. Fact 85. In Morty Night Run, the pair play a virtual reality game called Roy. A Life Well Lived. Roy's life is entirely ordinary. He works at a carpet store, deals with cancer, eventually dies. The point of the game is that it simulates an ordinary human life so completely that it becomes emotionally meaningful to people who have access to infinite universes. The show uses this as a comment on how human beings are wired for narrative and meaning regardless of what else is available to them. Fact 86. Concentrated dark matter, which appears in Season 1, is treated in the show as an enormously powerful fuel source. Dark matter is real. It makes up approximately 27% of the observable universe's total mass energy. We cannot see it directly. We infer its existence from its gravitational effects. What it is made of remains one of the most important open questions in physics. The show's version of dark matter takes one of science's biggest mysteries and gives it a convenient narrative use. Fact 87. The show consulted with actual scientists at various points in its development. At a San Diego Comic-Con panel in an early season, both Roiland and Harmon participated in a scientific discussion alongside quantum physicist Spiros Michalakis and neuroscientist Crystal Dilworth. The panel demonstrated that the writing team had genuine interest in and engagement with real scientific concepts, even if the show then took those concepts in wildly invented directions. Fact 88. Spiros Michalakis, the quantum physicist from that panel, is a scientific consultant who has worked with major film and television productions. His involvement with Rick and Morty, even in a panel discussion context, reflects the show's aspiration to anchor its flights of imagination in something grounded. Fact 89. The episode Lawnmower Dog deals with Morty giving a neural brain implant to the family dog Snuffles to prevent him from urinating on the carpet. This is a reference to actual neuroscience research into brain-computer interfaces. Companies like Neuralink, founded years after the episode aired, are pursuing exactly this kind of direct neural communication, albeit for human patients rather than dogs. Fact 90. Anatomy Park, the episode in which Rick builds a theme park inside a human body, is a direct parody of Inner Space, the 1987 film about a miniaturized pilot injected into a person's bloodstream. The science of miniaturization is treated as background magic in both cases. But the biological details the show does engage with, the role of the liver, the layout of internal organs, the immune system's response, are not entirely invented. Fact 91. The concept of portal technology in the show carries an implied physics of wormholes. Wormholes, or Einstein-Rosen bridges, are theoretical structures predicted by general relativity that could connect two separate points in spacetime. They are not known to exist, and maintaining one would theoretically require exotic matter with negative energy density. Rick's portal gun is essentially a small handheld wormhole generator. The show never explains how this was achieved, and it doesn't need to. Fact 92. Season 1's M. Night Shyamalan Aliens involves Rick being trapped in a simulated reality by aliens who are mining his memories for information. The concept of an imperfect simulation that reveals its nature through small errors is a well-established concept in philosophy and has been explored in scientific discussions about consciousness. The episode treats this premise with characteristic irreverence, but follows its internal logic carefully. Fact 93. The show's portrayal of consciousness and identity, particularly through the memory-erasing device in Morty's Mind Blowers and the cloning storylines in later seasons, engages seriously with the philosophical questions those concepts raise. What makes you the same person over time? If your memories are altered, are you still you? These are live questions in philosophy of mind, and the show uses them as plot engines without pretending to resolve them. Fact 94. The Vindicator's adjacent concept of superheroes in the Rick and Morty universe includes the idea that Rick genuinely finds them boring. To someone who has seen the actual science underlying the universe, the theatrical performances of costumed heroes seems like a small and provincial kind of significance. This is the show commenting, through Rick's arrogance, on the way extreme capability can make ordinary heroism look inadequate. Fact 95. The episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy contains an element that directly engages with the Fermi paradox, which asks why, if intelligent life should be statistically common in the universe, we have not yet encountered evidence of it. Rick's explanation is that any sufficiently advanced civilization would be consumed by its own internal complexity long before reaching out to other species. It's one answer among many proposed for the Fermi paradox, and Rick delivers it as a throwaway comment. Fact 96. The Roy virtual reality game in Morty Night Run is structured as a complete human lifetime. When Rick plays it and emerges, the show reveals he managed Roy's life in extraordinary ways, defeating cancer and excelling in ways a normal person would not. This is a quiet comment on how someone with Rick's problem-solving capability would approach the constraints of an ordinary human life, as a puzzle to be optimized rather than an experience to be lived. Fact 97. The book, The Science of Rick and Morty. The Unofficial Guide to Earth's Stupidest Show by science writer Matt Brady was published in 2019 and explores the real scientific theories underlying the show's plot concepts. It covers quantum physics, cloning, exoplanets, the fine structure constant, and multiverse theory. Its existence is itself a testament to how seriously the show engages with science compared to most animated programs. Fact 98. Pickle Rick, the Season 3 episode that won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program in 2018, is grounded in a real biological principle, even in its absurdity. The mechanics of Rick transforming himself into a pickle by injecting himself with a serum that inhibits the biotic functions that make you human is a comedic exaggeration of actual genetic and biochemical processes. Cells really do have switching mechanisms that determine which proteins are expressed and when. Fact 99. The Galactic Federation, which governs interplanetary civilization in the show's universe, is modeled on the kind of bureaucratic institution the show delights in mocking. It represents a commentary on how even infinite cosmic scale does not make institutions any less tedious, inefficient, or prone to corruption. The most advanced civilization in the observable universe still has forms to fill out and committees to report to. Fact 100. The show's constant use of Swifty, a word invented entirely for the show in Get Swifty, demonstrates how science fiction and comedy can create vocabulary. Linguists who study neologisms in popular media have noted Rick and Morty as one of the most productive sources of invented words in contemporary American English, alongside shows like The Simpsons and films like Star Wars. Part 4. Hidden details, Easter eggs, and the backgrounds. Every frame of Rick and Morty is drawn by hand, and the people drawing those frames frequently hide things in them. Background details, visual jokes, throwaway references, foreshadowing planted episodes before it pays off. Watching Rick and Morty is one experience. Watching it again with a paused finger on the remote is another experience entirely. Fact 101. In the pilot episode, the interdimensional custom zone includes a background shot that functions as a Where's Waldo-style Easter egg. Scattered among the alien figures waiting in line are silhouettes of creatures from other science fiction properties, including what appears to be a xenomorph from the Alien franchise, a prawn from District 9, and the Moonanites from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. These details exist for less than a second of screen time and require the episode to be paused to see clearly. Fact 102. The same pilot episode contains silhouettes of Tom Servo and Crow T. Robot from Mystery Science Theater, 3,000 inches the interdimensional customs area. This early callback to a beloved science fiction comedy series set the template for how the show would embed references within references, rewarding viewers who were paying extremely close attention. Fact 103. In the Season 3 premiere The Rick Shank Redemption, a framed picture of Doofus Rick can be spotted in the garage background if you look carefully. Doofus Rick, introduced in Season 1 as the least impressive Rick in the multiverse, formed an unlikely friendship with Jerry during the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. The fact that Jerry kept a framed photo of his friend is a small, sweet detail that says something genuine about Jerry's loneliness. Fact 104. Dan Harmon's Harmonious Claptrap Production Company logo, which appears at the end of each episode, changed noticeably between seasons. In Seasons 1 and 2, it shows Harmon sitting on a couch with his wife and pets in what appears to be a warm, happy domestic scene. In Season 3, following his divorce from comedian Aaron McGathy in 2015, the logo changed to show Harmon alone on the couch, surrounded by his pets, empty vodka bottles, and general debris. It's an entirely honest and somewhat heartbreaking little window into the creator's personal life. Fact 105. The Season 2 episode Total Rickle, in which parasitic aliens infiltrate the Smith house by implanting false memories, was actually foreshadowed in the previous episode Morty Night Run. At the very end of that episode, Rick can be seen loading glowing green rocks into the trunk of his car. Those rocks contained the parasite eggs. The show planted the setup one full episode before the payoff, trusting that viewers would either catch it the first time or discover it on rewatch. Fact 106. In the Season 1 episode, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, a post-credit scene shows Rick's bedroom for what appears to be the first time. On his wall, Rick has pinned pictures connected by conspiracy strings, tracking adventures. Visible among the photos are a Cronenberg monster, a Mr. Meeseeks box, Prince Nebulon from M. Night Shyamalan Aliens, Dr. Xenon Bloom from Anatomy Park, and a picture of Aberdolf Linkler, who would not actually appear until the following episode. The show was foreshadowing its own next episode in the background of a post-credits scene. Fact 107. The Gravity Falls crossover Easter egg, discovered by sharp-eyed fans, involves items lost through a portal in the Disney XD show Gravity Falls. Specifically, a notebook, a pen, and a yellow coffee mug with a question mark on it that disappear through a large portal in the episode Society of the Blind Eye. These exact items emerge from one of Rick's portals in the Rick and Morty episode, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. This was a deliberate collaboration between Roiland and Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, acknowledging each other's shows in their respective realities. Fact 108. The Truth Tortoise, from Morty's Mind Blowers in Season 3, delivers what sounds like gibberish when Morty looks into its eyes. If you reverse the audio, you can hear what sounds like Justin Roiland's muffled voice saying, "Paul is dead. I'm a beetle." This is a reference to the famous conspiracy theory about Paul McCartney having died in 1966 and been replaced by a look-alike, with the remaining Beatles supposedly hiding clues in reversed audio messages in their songs. Fact 109. In the Season 2 episode Autoerotic Assimilation, Rick asks the hive mind entity Unity to create a TV show for him. Unity produces what is clearly an alien version of Community, with extraterrestrial characters sitting around a study table in the same positions as the regular Community cast. This is both a Dan Harmon self-reference and a recurring gag in the episode where Rick then gives real-time notes on the show as though directing it. Fact 110. A 6-minute short film titled Rick and Morty, Samurai and Shogun aired unannounced on Adult Swim's Toonami programming block on the 29th of March 2020. It was a full anime-style production with Japanese voice actors, depicting Rick and Morty in a feudal Japan setting. It aired during a Season 4 hiatus, surprising viewers who had no warning it was coming. This stealth release strategy, appearing without announcement and running for hours, became something of a Rick and Morty tradition. Fact 111. The Season 1 episode, Rick's D-Minutes, introduced interdimensional cable, which became one of the most beloved recurring bits in the show's history. The interdimensional cable content was largely improvised by Roiland in the recording booth, with animators then creating visuals to match what he came up with. Shows like Ball Fondlers, How Did I Get Here, and the alien soap opera Alien Invasion Tomato Monster Mexican Armada Brothers were created in this way, with no script, just Roiland improvising and animators following. Fact 112. The Season 2 episode, Interdimensional Cable 2, Tempting Fate expanded on this format, and was the first episode to receive a TVMA rating from Adult Swim. The improvised nature of the interdimensional cable segments means they have a genuine quality of unpredictability. Even the writers don't always know exactly what the segments will contain, until after recording. Fact 113. The Get Swifty episode from Season 2 features a brief appearance of a Doctor Who Rick in the crowd at the Citadel of Ricks. He wears a long striped scarf, very similar to the one worn by the Fourth Doctor, Tom Baker, in the original 1970s series. This is exactly the kind of blink-and-you'll-miss-it detail that makes rewatching episodes rewarding. Fact 114. Several episodes of Rick and Morty contain background jokes in alien text. The show uses a fictional alien script that fans have actually decoded. Some background signs and labels, when translated, contain additional jokes or meta-commentary on the action happening in the foreground. The writers and animators included these, knowing they would almost certainly be found and translated by the show's dedicated fanbase. Fact 115. The episode The Reclantis Mix-Up, also called Tales from the Citadel, was notable for not featuring the main Rick and Morty at all. Instead, it was entirely set within the Citadel of Ricks and followed multiple, unrelated stories playing out simultaneously. The episode title is a misdirection, telling the audience to expect an Atlantis adventure while delivering something completely different. It is consistently ranked among the show's best episodes. Fact 116. The Season 3 episode The Rickshank Redemption premiered unannounced on April Fool's Day 2017. The network aired it continuously, in a loop, for approximately 4 hours. Viewers who tuned in expecting regular programming found the Season 3 premiere playing on repeat. Ratings improved with each loop, meaning people who caught it late were calling others to tune in. It was a unique television event that used the show's own relationship with surprise and chaos as a marketing strategy. Fact 117. The State of Georgia versus Denver Fenton Allen, an actual court case transcript, was dramatized by Roiland in a 2016 short posted to Adult Swim's YouTube channel. The transcript, from a real court proceeding involving extremely colorful exchanges, was brought to life with Rick and Morty animated in basic black and white sketches. It is a strange artifact that exists entirely outside the main show's canon, somewhere between found art and experimental comedy. Fact 118. Pocket Mortys, the mobile game developed as a companion to the show, allows players to collect hundreds of Morty variants in a Pokemon-style gameplay loop. Roiland himself provided additional voice work for the game. At launch, Pocket Mortys had over 14 million downloads, demonstrating the size and engagement of the show's fanbase. Fact 119. Rick and Morty. Virtual Rick, Ality, a VR game developed around the show, was the #1 most downloaded VR game on Steam at launch in April 2017. The game placed players inside Rick's garage and allowed them to use his various gadgets. It was reviewed favorably as one of the more immersive VR experiences available at the time. Fact 120. The show's companion game, Pocket Mortys, was referenced in Season 4's One Crew Over the Cuckoo's Morty, in which the crew of a heist goes wrong because of an elaborate plan within a plan. The show's tendency to fold its own extended universe back into the main narrative creates a fun kind of self-referential texture. Fact 121. In the background of several episodes, eagle-eyed viewers have spotted the phrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub," Rick's recurring catchphrase, written in the alien script that the show uses for background text. Finding it is a small game the animators set up for dedicated rewatchers. Fact 122. The phrase "Wubba lubba dub dub" was revealed within the show's fiction to be a phrase from Bird Person's language, meaning, "I am in great pain, please help me." This revelation, delivered casually in a Season 1 episode, retroactively recontextualized every previous use of the phrase and made Rick's cheerful repeated deployment of it into a quiet statement about how he performs happiness while hiding suffering. Fact 123. The Jerry Daycare Facility, first seen in Season 2, is one of the show's most compassionate world-building details. The Citadel of Ricks maintains a facility specifically designed for Jerrys to spend time safely and happily while their Ricks go on adventures without being embarrassed by them. The Jerrys are given activities they enjoy, kept comfortable, and essentially treated like adults who need to be managed. It is both a joke and a genuinely thoughtful piece of extrapolation. Fact 124. Rick's spaceship has appeared in multiple configurations across the show's run, adjusting in size and capability depending on what the plot requires. This is occasionally lampshaded by characters who notice the ship seems different than before. Rick's response is always some version of "I rebuilt it," which is never entirely satisfying, but the show clearly enjoys the meta-joke of the ship being whatever it needs to be. Fact 125. The Season 4 The Old Man in the Seat episode revealed that Rick has a planet in the universe designated specifically as his private bathroom. He goes there alone, sits on his handcrafted toilet with a personalized view of a beautiful landscape, and considers it his most sacred personal space. When he discovers someone else has been using it, his reaction is disproportionate and deeply funny precisely because of how much emotional weight he has placed on this particular private ritual. Fact 126. Mr. Nimbus, introduced in Season 5, is Rick's arch-nemesis. He controls the ocean. He arrived with the energy of a character who has decades of shared history with Rick, even though audiences were meeting him for the first time. The show treated him as though he had always existed in the canon, never explaining why he hadn't come up before. This confident world-building, presenting established history without apologizing for its absence, became a recurring technique. Fact 127. The title sequence of Rick and Morty changes subtly across seasons. Small details in the animation are updated to reflect developments in the show's ongoing story. The changes are not announced and are not always immediately obvious. They reward viewers who watch the opening of every episode, rather than skipping it. Fact 128. Rick's Garage Lab contains, in its background, a box labeled Time Travel Stuff that appears in multiple episodes. It is pushed to the back wall, slightly dusty, clearly not recently accessed. This visual gag is the show's constant reminder that time travel exists as a concept within its universe, but is deliberately being left on the shelf. Fact 129. The non-canonical claymation shorts released by Adult Swim between 2016 and 2021, written and directed by Lee Hardcastle, placed Rick and Morty characters into parodies of scenes from science fiction and horror films. These shorts, titled with the same names as the films they parodied, functioned as violent, funny miniatures that existed entirely outside the show's main timeline. Fact 130. In the Season 1 episode, Something Rick This Way Comes, Rick opens a competing shop across the street from the Devil's Cursed antique store. Rick's store offers scientifically explained versions of everything the devil sells. The joke is that Rick sees the devil not as a supernatural threat, but as an inferior competitor selling overpriced nonsense. And Rick delights in underpricing and outselling him. Part 5. The making of the show: production and voice acting. Behind every great show is an enormous amount of invisible labor. The work that happens between the script being finished and the episode reaching your screen involves hundreds of people doing their work carefully and quietly over the course of months. Fact 131. Rick and Morty's animation is produced primarily at Bartle Entertainment in Vancouver, Canada. The Vancouver studio handles the bulk of the show's visual production, while writing and production coordination happen in Los Angeles. This transatlantic collaboration requires careful coordination across time zones and production pipelines. Fact 132. The animation style of Rick and Morty deliberately uses what appear to be imprecise lines and slightly wobbly character outlines. This is not accidental sloppiness. It is a design choice that gives the show a handmade, sketch-like quality that distinguishes it from the cleaner animation of shows with larger budgets. The style reinforces the impression that you're watching something made by people who care more about ideas than technical polish. Fact 133. The show's art guidelines, discussed by art director Jeffrey Thompson, instruct animators to draw characters with odd or asymmetrical features. Faces should look slightly unusual. Proportions should feel a little off. This prevents the characters from looking too normal, maintaining the sense that even the supposedly ordinary humans in this universe live in a world that is subtly, constantly wrong. Fact 134. Roiland's voice recordings, before he was replaced beginning with Season 7, were often done in extended improvisational sessions. He would record the scripted lines and then keep going, exploring where the character might wander on its own. Writers would then review the improvised material and include the best parts, sometimes reshaping scenes around things Roiland had discovered in the booth. This collaborative improvisational approach to voice performance is relatively unusual in animation. Fact 135. The search for actors to replace Roiland, beginning with Season 7, lasted nearly 6 months and involved thousands of candidates. Showrunners Dan Harmon and Scott Marder described the casting process as deliberately focused on finding voices that would preserve the audience's experience rather than signal a change. The goal was for viewers who didn't know about the recasting to simply believe the show had always sounded this way. Fact 136. Ian Cardoni, cast as Rick starting in Season 7, and Harry Belden, cast as Morty, were kept anonymous until the Season 7 premiere aired. Their names were not released as part of the casting announcement. The network revealed the new voices were in place, but the specific actors were not identified until the credits rolled on the first new episode. This decision protected both the actors from premature scrutiny and preserved the audience's experience of encountering the new voices without preconceptions. Fact 137. The decision to cast 2 separate actors for Rick and Morty, rather than one actor voicing both as Roiland had done, was partly practical and partly philosophical. Showrunner Scott Marder noted that having one person voice both main characters had visibly worn on Roiland's voice over the years. With 2 actors, each character could receive a more focused, sustainable performance. Fact 138. John Allen was cast as Mr. Poopy Butthole for Season 7 onward. Allen had a background in anime voice work, with credits in major productions including Demon Slayer, Genshin Impact, and Dragon Ball Super. The character required someone who could replicate the specific warmth and positivity that defined the original performance while making the role his own. Fact 139. The Season 7 episode, That's a Morte, widely considered one of the standout episodes of that season, was written by Heather Ann Campbell. The episode, in which spaghetti derived from a mysterious and disturbing source becomes a sensation, is deeply weird and tonally assured. The specificity of its premise and the confidence of its execution made it a talking point among viewers who felt the show was still capable of delivering genuinely surprising material. Fact 140. Season 8 saw Danny DeVito guest starring as Dr. Dogballs, adding to the show's tradition of memorable one-season guest performances. DeVito has a specific quality of manic energy that makes him a natural fit for the Rick and Morty universe, and his involvement generated considerable anticipation before the season aired. Fact 141. Susan Sarandon, who voices Dr. Wong in Season 3 and beyond, is an Academy Award-winning actress. The show has a pattern of attracting genuinely prestigious voice talent for guest roles and recurring parts. Sarandon's Dr. Wong became so beloved that the character was brought back in later seasons, unusual for what was originally conceived as a one-episode role. Fact 142. Keith David, who voices President Curtis, brings a kind of bottomless authority to a character who functions partly as a parody of every presidential action hero trope in Hollywood history. David has one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment, and his antagonistic but actually allies relationship with Rick is one of the show's most reliable comedic dynamics. Fact 143. The show produces Blu-ray and DVD releases of each season, with extensive bonus materials, including episode commentary, animatics for every episode, behind-the-scenes recordings of the voice acting sessions, and featurettes about the animation process. These releases serve as detailed documents of how the show is made and have contributed to the show's critical reputation as a serious creative enterprise. Fact 144. The writer's room of Rick and Morty works differently from most television shows, in that the writing process is deeply integrated with the production pipeline. Scripts are written, then revised through production, with lines sometimes being added, cut, or changed during voice recording, and even during animation. This keeps the show responsive to opportunities and discoveries made throughout production. Fact 145. The show's music, beyond the theme, is composed primarily by Ryan Elder. Elder has been with the show since its beginning and has developed a musical vocabulary for it that spans everything from sweeping science fiction orchestration to comedic action music to the kind of brief, devastating quiet that accompanies the show's most emotionally raw moments. Fact 146. The production team of Rick and Morty filed a petition in February 2022 for a union election with the National Labor Relations Board, seeking to join the Animated Guild. This was part of a broader movement in the animation industry toward unionization, seeking better pay, working conditions, and job security for animation workers. The filing covered both the Rick and Morty crew and the crew of Solar Opposites, another Roiland co-created show produced at the same studio. Fact 147. Solar Opposites, which Roiland co-created with Mike McMahon for Hulu, shares several creative DNA strands with Rick and Morty, and has often been discussed as its spiritual sibling. When Roiland was separated from both shows, Solar Opposites recast his character with Dan Stevens, while Rick and Morty went the sound-alike route. The two shows took different approaches to the same challenge. Fact 148. Mike McMahon, a writer on Rick and Morty for several seasons, went on to create Star Trek: Lower Decks for CBS All Access. Lower Decks, an animated series about the lower-ranking crew members of a Starfleet ship, carries visible Rick and Morty DNA in its comedic sensibility and its willingness to engage seriously with the emotional lives of its characters, while being broadly, enthusiastically funny. Fact 149. The show has produced 4 Japanese anime-style short films, all written and directed by Takashi Sano and produced by Sola Entertainment. These shorts, including Samurai and Shogun, Rick and Morty vs. Genocider, Summer Meets God, Rick Meets Evil, and The Great Yokai Battle of Akihabara, aired unannounced on Adult Swim's Toonami block. Their existence reflects the show's global cultural reach and the genuine enthusiasm for the property in Japan's animation community. Fact 150. Rick and Morty. The anime, a full-length spin-off animated series, was announced and began development alongside Season 8. This represents a significant expansion of the property into a format that treats the characters and universe through a completely different animation tradition, one with its own established visual language for science fiction, action, and character-driven storytelling. Part 6. Cultural Impact and the World Outside the Show. Fact 151. Rick and Morty's third season, ended as the most-watched television comedy among adults aged 18 to 24. According to a Nielsen poll, the president of Adult Swim noted that the show's audience extended beyond millennials, with viewers of every age demographic tuning in. The third season finale was the most-watched telecast of the day across cable for adults aged 18 to 24, 18 to 34, and 18 to 49 simultaneously, delivering the highest ratings in Adult Swim's history. Fact 152. The show holds a 90% average approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes across its entire run as of its current seasons. For a show in its 8th season that has undergone significant cast changes, this is a remarkable demonstration of sustained critical regard. Fact 153. Rick and Morty won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program in 2018 for the episode Pickle Rick, and again in 2020 for a Season 4 episode. The Emmy wins represented a significant moment of institutional recognition for a show that operated in a space often associated with juvenile humor, placing it formally in the company of shows like The Simpsons, which had won the same award many times. Fact 154. The McDonald's Szechuan sauce incident is one of the most singular examples of a television show causing a real-world commercial event in recent memory. A single monologue, delivered by Rick in the Season 3 premiere, referenced a limited edition dipping sauce that McDonald's had offered in 1998 as a promotional tie-in with the Disney film Mulan. That sauce had been discontinued for nearly 2 decades when Rick declared it his series arc. Fact 155. Within weeks of the Season 3 premiere in April 2017, McDonald's was receiving social media pressure to bring the sauce back. The chain sent a jug of the recreated sauce to Justin Roiland as a promotional gesture. On the 7th of October 2017, McDonald's announced a one-day limited return of Szechuan sauce. Locations across the country ran out within an hour. Lines formed before restaurants opened. Fights broke out at locations that didn't receive stock. It generated national news coverage. Fact 156. The Szechuan sauce riots, as they came to be known, were both a testament to the show's cultural reach and an illustration of a gap between the show's intended meaning and how a segment of its fanbase engaged with it. Dan Harmon and others connected to the show noted that the Szechuan monologue was meant as a joke about the absurdity of nostalgia, not a genuine manifesto for a sauce campaign. The chaos that followed was, in some ways, the opposite of the point. Fact 157. On the 26th of February 2018, McDonald's brought back Szechuan sauce for a wider release, making 20 million cups of the sauce available across participating locations. This second release was better organized and less chaotic. The sauce eventually returned again on the 31st of March 2022. As an app-only exclusive, completing what had become one of the stranger chapters in the history of fast food marketing. Fact 158. I'm Pickle Rick became one of the most widely recognized memes of 2017 and 2018, crossing into mainstream awareness in a way that very few animated show moments achieve. Rick's transformation into a pickle was not a plot development that required extensive setup. It was a single absurd image paired with a line reading by Roiland that managed to capture something impossible to define and spread it across the internet instantly. Fact 159. Within minutes of the Pickle Rick episode airing, merchandise featuring the image was available for purchase online. Adult Swim moved quickly to meet the demand, releasing t-shirts, figures, plushies, and eventually, a human-sized inflatable Pickle Rick costume. The speed of the merchandise production reflected both the planning Adult Swim had done around predictable fan response and the genuine instantaneous quality of the moment. Fact 160. The show has produced extensive licensed merchandise across every conceivable category: clothing, toys, collectibles, accessories, furniture, food products, and more. There have been Pickle Rick branded items in dozens of different forms. There is a Rick and Morty branded hot sauce, a Rick and Morty cookbook, and Rick and Morty Dungeons & Dragons crossover comic books. Fact 161. The Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons crossover comic, co-written by Patrick Rothfuss, the fantasy novelist behind The Name of the Wind, was published by IDW and Oni Press. It depicted the characters engaging with a tabletop role-playing game campaign and was notable for being written by someone who brought genuine knowledge of both D&D mechanics and narrative structure to the material. Fact 162. A second Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons comic series, subtitled Painscape, was published in 2018. The Rick and Morty vs. Dungeons & Dragons Deluxe Edition collected both series and was nominated for the 2022 Best Graphic Album Reprint Eisner Award, placing it in conversation with the most prestigious recognition in American comics. Fact 163. The show has appeared as a reference or cameo in other animated programs, including Family Guy and American Dad. The American Dad appearance included a background glimpse of Pickle Rick, a show-within-a-show acknowledgement of the cultural ubiquity of the Rick and Morty universe. These crossovers exist in their own separate metaspace, acknowledging Rick and Morty as a cultural object rather than folding it into shared canon. Fact 164. Adult Swim collaborated with Wendy's fast food chain to create commercials featuring Rick and Morty, which aired as part of the show's promotional campaigns. These commercials placed the animated characters in advertising for a competing fast food chain, a meta-commentary on the show's complicated relationship with commercialism that the creators seem to enjoy. Fact 165. The show's fan base has been a subject of analysis, satire, and sometimes criticism from cultural observers. A subset of viewers adopted Rick's nihilistic worldview as a genuine philosophy, rather than as a satirical target, leading to online communities built around the idea of superior intellect that the show's creators found both frustrating and amusing. Harmon has been publicly critical of this portion of the fanbase. Fact 166. Rick and Morty's impact on the animation industry is visible in the wave of adult animated programs that followed in its wake, attempting to replicate its blend of genre science fiction, dark comedy, and genuine character development. Shows like Disenchantment, Final Space, Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts, and others were developed with awareness of what Rick and Morty had demonstrated an audience for. Fact 167. The show's April Fool's Day live streaming event for the Season 3 premiere on AdultSwim.com registered 3 million unique visitors. Facebook, which co-hosted the live stream, recorded 43.3 million impressions and 8.7 million video views combined. These numbers demonstrated the show's ability to generate a real-time shared experience in an era when most television viewing had become asynchronous. Fact 168. Rick and Morty's influence reached academic spaces. Several universities have used the show in philosophy courses to illustrate concepts from nihilism, existentialism, ethics of power, and the nature of consciousness. There is a book titled Rick and Morty and Philosophy. In the Beginning Was the Squanch, part of the Popular Culture and Philosophy series, which treats the show as a serious text for philosophical analysis. Fact 169. The show generated dedicated online fan communities on Reddit, Twitter, and fan wikis that are among the most active and detailed in animated television fandom. The Rick and Morty wiki is extraordinary in its depth, containing highly detailed articles on every character, location, dimension, and piece of technology that appears in the show, including thorough analysis of canonicity and cross-episode continuity. Fact 170. The show has inspired fan art at a volume and quality level that few animated programs achieve. Professional artists, illustrators, and animators have created tribute work, ranging from quick sketches to museum-quality paintings exploring the show's themes. Some of this fan art has been formally acknowledged by the show's production team as exceptional. Part 7. The Deep Lore Canon, Theories, and Continuity. Rick and Morty is famous for presenting itself as a show that doesn't take its own continuity seriously, while actually maintaining a remarkably detailed and internally consistent mythology beneath the chaos. The lore is there for anyone willing to look for it. Fact 171. The main Rick is Rick Sanchez from Dimension C-137. But the main Morty, despite what early episodes suggest, is not from C-137. Morty is from the Cronenberg dimension, which is also the prime dimension where Rick Prime originated. The distinction matters because Rick C-137 traveled to the Cronenberg dimension and essentially replaced Rick Prime there, building a life with Prime's family while searching for his enemy. The Morty that Rick C-137 adventures with is technically Rick Prime's original grandson. Fact 172. Dimension C-137, Rick's actual home dimension, is where his wife Diane and daughter Beth were killed. In that dimension, there was never a Summer or a Morty, because Beth died when she was still a child, long before those grandchildren could have been born. When Rick returns to Cone 137 inches Season 6, he finds that he had placed the entire dimension in a time loop, trapping the world on the day he lost his family. He eventually releases it, allowing the inhabitants the mercy of moving forward through time again. Fact 173. Rick Prime, the overarching villain of the show, was the first Rick to independently develop portal gun technology. He then went to other dimensions and invited other Ricks to join him in multiverse exploration. Rick C-137 refused because he loved his family. In retaliation or spite, Rick Prime sent a bomb through a portal to Rick C-137's garage. The bomb killed Diane and the young Beth. This act is the axis around which the entire show rotates. Fact 174. After losing his family, Rick C-137 spent years hunting Rick Prime across the multiverse, killing many other Rick variants along the way. He eventually exhausted the search without finding Prime, and ended up settling in the Cronenberg dimension, where Prime's abandoned Morty and Beth were still living. He introduced himself as Morty's grandfather and built a new life, which is where the show begins. Fact 175. Rick Prime's most devastating action came later. Using a device called the Omega device, he erased Diane Sanchez from every dimension simultaneously. This is why, no matter how many dimensions the show visits, Diane is never there. She has been removed from the multiverse entirely. Only memories of her remain. Fact 176. The confrontation between Rick C-137 and Rick Prime in Season 7 concluded the show's longest-running narrative thread. Evil Morty temporarily allied with Rick C-137 to help defeat Prime, for his own reasons, and after a brutal fight, Rick killed his nemesis. The aftermath was notable. Rick immediately fell into a depression because he had organized his entire existence around this goal, and its completion left him with nothing to chase. Fact 177. Evil Morty's full name within the show's fan community and wiki is President Morty, to distinguish him from our Morty. His plan, visible in hindsight from his first appearance, was always about escaping the central finite curve. He understood before almost anyone else what the curve was and what it meant. His presidency at the Citadel was never about ruling. It was about accessing the Citadel's technology to break the curve and leave. Fact 178. The central finite curve was constructed by the collective Ricks, specifically to create a walled section of the multiverse, where Rick is always the smartest being. In every dimension inside the curve, the conditions that produce Rick Sanchez are also conditions where Rick ends up on top. It's a monument to collective ego, a civilization, scale structure built to ensure that the builders can never be outcompeted. Fact 179. Evil Morty's breakthrough moment, the scene at the end of the Season 5 finale where he shatters the curve and flies out into unconstrained infinity, is one of the most striking images the show has produced. The golden portal opening into a multiverse, where Rick is not automatically the most powerful thing, is simultaneously a victory for the show's underdog, and a genuinely ominous development. A Morty empowered beyond what Ricks can control, heading into dimensions no Rick has ever visited. Fact 180. The Cronenberged world, dimension, which is what most viewers initially believed to be Dimension C-137, is actually Rick Prime's home dimension. The Cronenberg state of that world was caused by Morty's accidental mutation of the entire population in the Season 1 episode, Rick Potion Number 9. Rick C-137 and Morty moved out of that dimension after Rick's love potion correction went catastrophically wrong. The replacement Rick and Morty they buried in the garden of the new dimension were versions of themselves from that new dimension who had died in an explosion. Fact 181. The concept of the Citadel of Ricks was introduced in Season 1, but fully explored in Season 3's Ricklantis Mix-Up and Season 5's Rick Otherwise Mortpocalypse. The Citadel is a fully functioning society with its own political structure, economy, education system, and social hierarchy. The episode exploring it in depth is entirely from the perspective of non-main Ricks and Mortys, none of whom are the characters we know. It functions as a standalone character piece about institutional power. Fact 182. Rick's portal fluid, the substance that powers the portal gun, is something only Rick C-137 could produce independently. Other Ricks, those who built their portal guns based on Rick Prime's stolen or shared designs, depend on a supply chain of portal fluid they didn't generate themselves. C-137 is one of only 2 Ricks who actually figured out the underlying physics from scratch. Fact 183. The Galactic Federation, which governed interplanetary civilization for much of the show's first 2 seasons, was dismantled by Rick in the Season 3 premiere by introducing a virus into their system that converted their currency to zeros. The economic collapse that followed destroyed the Federation. Rick did this casually, as a side effect of escaping custody, without presenting it as a heroic act. The consequences for billions of beings in the galaxy were treated as background noise. Fact 184. Rick's relationship with the Council of Ricks, the governing body of the Citadel before Evil Morty's presidency, was always hostile. Rick C-137 considered the Council a group of Ricks who had given up their independence in exchange for safety, which he saw as a fundamental betrayal of what it means to be a Rick. This conflict eventually led to Rick destroying the Council in the Season 3 premiere. Fact 185. The Galactic Federation's prison, where Rick is held at the beginning of Season 3, is called Galactic Prison, or Federal Penitentiary Shorsholen. Rick's escape from this facility by essentially mental hacking his way through the interrogating agent's brain is one of the most densely plotted sequences in the show's history, nested within nested false memories. Fact 186. The concept of Morty's brainwaves canceling out Rick's has been a consistent piece of in-world explanation for why Rick keeps Morty close. Because Rick is so intelligent, his brain generates a distinctive wave pattern that can be detected by Rick tracking technology. Morty's less remarkable brain waves, when in proximity to Rick's, create interference that masks them. In-universe, this is why Rick needs a Morty. But the show is also clear that Rick has genuine affection for this specific Morty that goes beyond practical utility. Fact 187. The show contains a recurring background theory among fans about the nature of Morty C-137 specifically, suggesting that he may be uniquely extraordinary among Mortys rather than simply the one Rick happened to end up with. Evidence includes the Season 1 episode where Morty led a revolt of Mortys against evil Rick, demonstrating leadership and strategic thinking that no other Morty is shown to possess, and multiple instances across the show where Morty's choices and actions have consequences that ripple through the multiverse in unusual ways. Fact 188. The Omega device, created by Rick Prime, is presented as the most destructive weapon in the show's universe. Its ability to erase a person from all possible realities, simultaneously, is described as requiring knowledge of physics, far beyond what any other being in the show has demonstrated. The fact that Rick Prime created it suggests that his intelligence, while motivated by cruelty rather than curiosity, may rival or exceed Rick C-137's. Fact 189. Bird Person's transformation into Phoenix Person, the Federation-controlled cyborg, represents one of the show's most sustained pieces of character-based storytelling. The slow revelation of what was done to Bird Person and the longer arc of Rick trying to restore him spans multiple seasons. The process is not fully resolved by the end of Season 6, leaving some portion of what Bird Person was still partially inaccessible. Fact 190. The show contains multiple timelines and dimensions simultaneously, which means that events have consequences that can never be fully traced. When Rick acts in one dimension, something changes. Other Ricks change their behavior in response. The Citadel makes a policy decision. A character in a dimension we've never visited makes a choice that affects a dimension we have. The show's universe is alive and interconnected in ways the narrative only occasionally illuminates. Part 8. Season by season, the big surprises. Each season of Rick and Morty has had its own identity, its own tonal center of gravity, its own unexpected moments that people talked about for months. Let's walk through the seasons with some of the facts that shaped each one. Fact 191. Season 1, which aired in 2013 and 2014, contained 11 episodes and was essentially the show finding itself in real time. By the time it aired, Adult Swim was running it in a primetime adjacent position to compete with major broadcast networks. That pressure, combined with a TV-14 rating that restricted some of the show's natural inclinations, made Season 1 a slightly constrained version of what the show would become. Fact 192. The Season 1 episode, Rick Potion Number 9, is widely cited as the moment many viewers realized the show was doing something different from other animated comedies. Rick and Morty's complete abandonment of their dimension at the end of that episode, burying their own dead bodies and taking over another version of their lives, was presented without cleanup or resolution. The show reset without resetting, and the weight of that non-resolution was left on the audience. Fact 193. Season 2, which arrived in 2015, expanded the show's mythology and introduced several characters and concepts that would become central to later seasons. The introduction of Evil Morty's full profile, the exploration of the Galactic Federation, and the devastation of Birdperson's wedding all happened in Season 2. The finale, in which Rick voluntarily surrenders to the Galactic Federation to save his family, ends on a cliffhanger that left viewers waiting for over a year. Fact 194. The Season 2 episode, Total Rickle, is consistently ranked among the show's best episodes by critics and fans alike. Its premise, parasites implanting fake memories in the form of lovable new characters, was a direct comedic engagement with the conventions of animated shows that introduce new characters constantly. Every fake character in Total Rickle is a parody of a particular type of recurring animated supporting character. Fact 195. Season 3, which began with the unannounced April Fool's Day premiere in 2017 and ran weekly from July to October, was the show's biggest season both commercially and culturally. The Season 3 finale was watched by more people in the advertiser-friendly demographics than anything else on cable television that night, including competing shows on major networks. Adult Swim declared it the most-watched season in their history. Fact 196. Season 3's Pickle Rick became the show's most awarded episode. The Emmy win in 2018 for Outstanding Animated Program was awarded specifically for this episode, beating The Simpsons, Big Mouth, Bob's Burgers, and BoJack Horseman. Peter Dinklage, known for his role in Game of Thrones, provided commentary for the physical home release of the episode, a measure of the episode's cultural prestige. Fact 197. Season 4, which aired in 2019 and 2020, was split into two halves. 5 episodes before the end of 2000, and 19 and 5 more in 2020. The split release strategy caused a significant drop in viewership for the second half, approximately 40% compared to the first half. The show's momentum depends partly on the sustained attention of viewers whose engagement dissipates over extended gaps. Fact 198. Season 4 introduced Mr. Nimbus, who controls the ocean, in a memorable cold open. It also contained the Vat of Acid episode, in which Morty gets a device that creates save states in reality. The episode won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program in 2020, making Rick and Morty a 2-time Emmy winner and one of only a handful of animated programs to win in consecutive eligible years. Fact 199. Season 5, which aired in 2021, is notable for introducing Spacebeth as a permanent recurring character, for the climactic confrontation with Rick Prime's buildup, and for the Season 5 finale in which Evil Morty fully reveals his plan and breaks through the central finite curve. The finale is considered one of the show's best episodes and is frequently discussed as a narrative achievement in serialized animated storytelling. Fact 200. The Season 5 premiere was posted on YouTube and received 1.7 million views within the first 12 hours. The television premiere saw 1.9 million viewers. These numbers represented strong continued audience engagement in a media landscape where cable television viewership had been declining broadly. Fact 201. Season 6, which aired in 2022, was the last season to feature Roiland's voice work in a full contributing capacity. His contributions at this point were limited to remote voice recordings at his home studio, as his working relationship with Harmon and the production team had deteriorated significantly. The Season 6 premiere set the highest ratings in telecast for the 18 to 24 and 18 to 34 women demographics, suggesting the show's audience had diversified considerably from its early years. Fact 202. Season 6 ended the Rick Prime narrative arc's buildup and contained the episode Unmortrican, in which Rick C-137 and Evil Morty temporarily ally to confront Prime. The episode was notable for bringing together the show's two most complex antagonists and its protagonist in a single narrative, while also finally revealing what Rick Prime had done to Diane across the multiverse. Fact 203. Season 7, which premiered the 15th of October 2023 as the first season without Roiland, was watched by fans and critics with specific attention to whether the voice replacements would hold. The critical consensus was that the transition was fairly seamless, as Rotten Tomatoes put it, with the new voices sounding sufficiently similar that the characters remained recognizable and felt continuous. Fact 204. The Season 7 premiere, How Poopy Got His Poop Back, focused heavily on Mr. Poopy Butthole, as if to immediately demonstrate confidence in the recast character. By leading with a character that required a voice replacement and giving that character the spotlight, the production signaled that it wasn't afraid of the scrutiny. Fact 205. Season 7's most praised episode, That's Amorte, involves the discovery that the world's most popular new food product has a horrifying secret origin. The episode's willingness to go to a very dark place with its central reveal, and its equally dark conclusion, reminded viewers of the show's capacity for genuinely disturbing concepts packaged in comedy. Fact 206. Season 8 premiered the 25th of May 2025, with the episode Summer of All Fears. The season continued the show's pattern of balancing standalone comedic episodes with ongoing canonical development. The Citadel was partially rebuilt in the season's third episode by a group of Rick clones, suggesting the show intended to return to that thread. Fact 207. The Season 8 episode Morty Daddy, which aired the 20th of July 2025, featured Morty reconnecting with someone from his past. This kind of character-focused episode, taking time to examine Morty's relationships and emotional continuity, demonstrates that the show has remained committed to its human-scale character work, even as it explores multiverse-scale stakes. Fact 208. Season 9 of Rick and Morty is confirmed for the 24th of May 2026 premiere. The show's continuation through a 12th season, confirmed in October 2024, means Rick and Morty is committed to at least several more years of storytelling. Given the groundwork laid through the Rick Prime arc's conclusion and Evil Morty's escape through the central finite curve, the show has significant narrative territory still ahead of it. Fact 209. The Season 1 hiatus between Seasons 1 and 2 was approximately 1 year. The hiatus between Seasons 2 and 3 was nearly 2 years, from 2015 to 2017, and became a source of significant fan frustration and internet memes about the wait. The hiatus between Seasons 3 and 4 was also nearly 2 years. These gaps, while frustrating to viewers, were often described by the production team as necessary for the show's quality, given its complexity and the writing-intensive nature of each episode's concept. Fact 210. The show's 5th season was originally set to air in 2020, but was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted animation production pipelines globally. The pandemic delay meant a gap from the May 2020 Season 4 finale to the June 2021 Season 5 premiere, roughly 13 months, compressed compared to previous gaps, but still significant for an audience accustomed to waiting. Part 9. The Last Stretch Facts. 211 to 290. We're in the quiet hours now, the kind of time when thoughts get slower and more generous. Let the following facts wash over you like background light. Fact 211. Rick and Morty has influenced a generation of animated creators who cite it as a formative influence. Showrunners of newer adult animated programs regularly mention the show as having demonstrated that animation could do something that live-action television found harder. Be simultaneously funny, philosophically dense, emotionally devastating, and genuinely weird, all within a 22-minute runtime. Fact 212. The number of fan theories generated by Rick and Morty exceeds virtually any other animated show in recent history. Some of these theories, particularly around Evil Morty's identity and motivations, were proven correct by the show years after they were formulated. The writers have never confirmed whether they deliberately set up theories to fulfill, or whether the show's internal consistency simply made those theories inevitable. Fact 213. Rick Sanchez's name carries Spanish heritage. Rick is a shortened form of Ricardo. Sanchez is a common Spanish surname. The show has occasionally engaged with this heritage, though not as centrally as some fans would like. In Season 5, Rick visits a dimension populated by his family members, and the episode explores Mexican family dynamics with more directness than the show typically employs. Fact 214. The show has a tradition of post-credits scenes that range from brief comedic codas to significant narrative reveals. These scenes are often where the show deposits information it doesn't want to interrupt the main episode's pacing to include, or where it rewards viewers who don't turn off the television the moment the main story ends. Fact 215. Rick's habit of saying Morty approximately once every 2 to 3 sentences, even when addressing Morty directly, is a deliberate verbal tic that communicates both his habit of commanding attention and his constant assessment of whether Morty is tracking with him. The repetition of the name is a form of punctuation in Rick's speech, an ongoing check that his audience is present. Fact 216. The show has engaged with mental health themes more directly than most mainstream animated programs. Rick's depression, alcoholism, and apparent suicidal ideation are treated with a degree of authenticity that reflects Harmon's stated willingness to write from personal experience. Several episodes contain moments that function almost as clinical observations of what severe depression, combined with exceptional capability, looks like. Fact 217. The episode Rest and Ricklaxation from Season 3 introduced a device that separates a person's toxic qualities from their healthy ones, creating two separate beings. Healthy Rick is cheerful, social, easy to be around, and entirely hollow. Toxic Rick is a howling it of misery, cruelty, and need. The episode argues that neither version is complete. The toxicity is not separable from the person without taking something essential away. It is one of the show's clearest statements about the relationship between pain and identity. Fact 218. Beth's horse surgery specialty is used as a consistent punchline across the show, but it becomes a serious symbol of something quite sad when the show takes time to acknowledge that Beth had the grades, the aptitude, and the ambition to become a human surgeon. The path she took, marrying young and operating on animals, is a result of a specific sequence of choices, made partly in the absence of parental guidance that Rick's abandonment created. Her competence is real. The reduced scope in which she exercises it is a consequence. Fact 219. Jerry's relationship with Morty, while often played as comic relief, contains one of the show's most consistent examples of unconditional love. Jerry loves Morty without qualification or agenda. He doesn't love Morty because Morty is useful or impressive. He loves him because Morty is his son. In a show full of love, expressed through usefulness and tested by capability, Jerry's uncomplicated affection for his children stands out. Fact 220. Morty's academic struggles are a consistent element of his character that the show never resolves. He is perpetually behind in school, perpetually missing class to go on adventures, and perpetually unable to explain where he has been. The disconnect between his extraordinary experiences and his ordinary academic standing is one of the show's running background jokes that occasionally sharpens into something more serious. Fact 221. The character of Jessica, Morty's longtime crush, underwent significant development in Season 7, when she was revealed to have a connection to cosmic forces that transforms her into a time god. This development finally gave the character, who had been a motivation for Morty's behavior for 6 seasons without much of her own interior life, a genuine arc of her own. Fact 222. The Vindicator's leader, Morty Knight, introduced in Season 3 as a superhero who idolizes Morty, is a pointed commentary on how heroism in popular culture is often as much about narrative as about accomplishment. Morty Knight hero worships Morty for adventures. Morty describes, the adventures Morty describes are not always what actually happened. The show uses this to examine how mythology forms around people, often distorting the actual person in the process. Fact 223. The show's title sequence, which features Rick and Morty encountering various cosmic hazards before the title card appears, changes in subtle ways across seasons. The alien they escape from, the background planetary bodies, the scale of the disasters they're fleeing, These details shift between seasons in ways that reflect what the show is currently doing tonally. Fact 224. Rick's spaceship has a self-driving feature, and its AI is capable of independent action when Rick is incapacitated. Several episodes feature the ship making decisions autonomously, sometimes saving its passengers and sometimes making choices that complicate the situation. The ship functions as a character in its own right, particularly after the revelation that its AI is modeled on Diane. Fact 225. The Eye-Hole Man commercial that runs during the interdimensional cable segment in Season 3 is among the most beloved pieces of absurdist comedy the show has produced. Its escalating logic, in which a person's possession of eye holes apparently grants them no rights while the Eye-Hole Man's rights are absolute and violent, is a perfect parody of the arbitrary rules that govern both advertising and social contracts. Fact 226. The show's adult content is partly protected by the Adult Swim timeslot convention, which places programming after 10 p.m. on weekdays and Cartoon Network on weekends. This scheduling convention gives Adult Swim programming significant freedom in content relative to primetime television, and Rick and Morty has used that freedom consistently across its run. Fact 227. Galactic Federation bureaucracy, depicted throughout the show as simultaneously menacing and absurdly tedious, is modeled partly on the experience of dealing with large institutions in real life. The processing centers, the form filling, the waiting in line, the casual indifference of the agents managing civilization-scale consequences. These are exaggerated versions of recognizable frustrations. Fact 228. The show's treatment of the concept of the Rickest Rick is an ongoing thread in how Rick understands and presents himself. The Rickest Rick is the one who is most completely what a Rick is: brilliant, independent, emotionally unavailable, willing to go further than any other Rick. Rick C-137 considers himself to be this, and the show generally supports that assessment while also complicating what it means to want to be that. Fact 229. Morty's catchphrase, "Oh geez," Rick has become so associated with the character that it has entered colloquial use in the same way that Rick's catchphrases have. The specific vocal quality of it, a sound somewhere between resignation and low-grade panic, captures something universally relatable about being placed in a situation you didn't choose by someone who is simultaneously your greatest protector and greatest source of danger. Fact 230. The show's end credits are scored with music that consistently fits the emotional tone of whatever the episode just put viewers through. After the devastating ending of Rick Potion number 9, the credits play over quiet guitar. After the chaotic energy of Ricksy Business, the music is buoyant and celebratory. This attention to the emotional afterstate of each episode extends the show's intentionality into a space most shows leave empty. Fact 231. Rick's portal gun contains a finite amount of portal fluid, which means there is theoretically a limit to how many portals Rick can open before needing to refill. This constraint is occasionally acknowledged and occasionally used as a plot device, but the show doesn't consistently enforce it. Like many of the show's internal rules, it exists when it is useful and is quietly ignored when it isn't. Fact 232. The show has referenced Breaking Bad multiple times, most notably in the confession by Pickle Rick's writers that the episode was partly inspired by the AMC drama. Pickle Rick shares with Breaking Bad the dynamic of an immensely capable person dismantling their own life through a series of choices, made from a place of pride rather than necessity. The show has consistently admired Breaking Bad's approach to consequence and character. Fact 233. The interdimensional cable format, which was a showcase for Roiland's improvisational recording, was revisited twice across the first 3 seasons. It was not returned to after Season 3, which some fans attributed to the declining working relationship between Roiland and the rest of the production team. The format requires a particular kind of spontaneous, collaborative energy that the later production dynamic apparently no longer supported as easily. Fact 234. Rick's cold demeanor toward Mr. Meeseeks in the episode Meeseeks and Destroy is consistent with how Rick treats tools. The Meeseeks box is Rick's invention, and he regards the beings it creates with the same mixture of casual ownership and indifference that he applies to his other technologies. That the Meeseeks are sentient and suffering is a detail Rick is aware of, and has clearly made his peace with. His peace with it tells you something significant about his ethical framework. Fact 235. The Season 3 episode, The ABCs of Beth, reveals explicitly that Rick built Beth weapons and devices as a child, recognizing her destructive impulses and choosing to enable them rather than redirect them. The implication is that Rick both knew and possibly feared what Beth might do to others if denied outlets. This backstory complicates Beth in ways the show doesn't fully explore but plants material for future seasons to work with. Fact 236. Rick's relationship to authority of any kind is consistently contemptuous. Government, galactic governance, the Citadel, family structure, social convention, all of it is presented as something Rick tolerates at best and actively sabotages at worst. The show's writers have been explicit that this is partly a reflection of both creators' own relationships to institutional authority. Fact 237. Rick Morty Jack from Season 5 is the episode that finally, explicitly, shows the audience Rick C-137's true backstory. Through Morty accessing Rick's brain scan, viewers see the actual sequence of events. Diane's death, Rick's grief, his development of the portal gun, his hunting of other Ricks, and how he eventually ended up with this particular Morty. It is the episode that transforms the show's mythology from implication to statement. Fact 238. The show uses throwaway details in ways that often carry enormous weight. Characters mention events, people, and places in passing that imply a much larger universe of experiences off-screen. Rick's references to adventures the audience hasn't seen, to enemies dealt with before the show began, to losses and failures never dramatized, create the impression of a person who has lived an immense amount of life that exists outside any narrative frame. Fact 239. Morty's relationship with his memories is complicated by the existence of the memory-erasing device in Morty's mind blowers. The revelation that Morty has had so many horrifying experiences that he regularly chooses to delete them changes how viewers should understand every expression of Morty's adjustment to adventure. His apparent resilience may partly be the result of ongoing self-erasure, rather than genuine emotional processing. Fact 240. Rick's comment at the end of Rick Morty Jack, after Morty sympathizes with his backstory, "Now everyone can shut up about it," is perfect character writing. For the first time, the show has shown audiences the full weight of what Rick carries. His response is not to accept comfort or validation, but to simply close the door. His pain is real, fully revealed, and immediately reprivatized. That combination is one of the most precise characterizations in the show's run. Fact 241. The show has never definitively answered whether Rick loves Morty. It has shown Rick putting enormous resources, risk, and sacrifice toward Morty's well-being. It has shown Rick saying things that sound like love. It has shown Rick denying that his relationship with Morty is anything other than practical utility. All three of these things are true simultaneously, and the show is content to let them remain in tension. Fact 242. The Cronenberged dimension, after Rick and Morty leave it and take up residence in a new dimension, continues to exist. The show has occasionally briefly revisited it, showing the world inhabited by mutated beings, continuing to live and adapt in Rick and Morty's absence. It is one of the most haunting applications of the show's consequences persist ethos. The world they broke keeps going. Just broken. Fact 243. Summer's character development across the show's run represents one of its quietest but most consistent arcs. She begins as an almost deliberately underdeveloped older sibling, present but peripheral, and slowly becomes someone who has earned her place in the adventures through demonstrated capability and genuine courage. Her Season 8 episode, Summer of All Fears, giving her the titular role, suggests the show is continuing to invest in who she is. Fact 244. Beth and Space Beth's relationship is one of the show's most original ongoing dynamics. Two versions of the same person, each claiming an equal right to the identity, building a relationship with each other that is by definition unprecedented. The show treats their interactions with curiosity rather than resolution, allowing them to be strange and funny, and occasionally deeply uncomfortable all at once. Fact 245. The show's approach to serialization has evolved across its run. Early seasons were almost entirely episodic, with lore dropped in as flavor rather than architecture. Later seasons have built increasingly sustained narrative arcs while maintaining the episodic format. The show found a way to be both things, each episode satisfying on its own terms, each episode also a piece of something larger. Fact 246. Jerry's survival across every season, despite being dismissed as useless by virtually every other character in the show, is treated by the show itself as a point in his favor. Jerry keeps going. He doesn't have the skills or the intelligence to change his situation dramatically, but he is still there at the end of every season, still loving his family, still being who he is. In a universe that kills interesting people all the time, Jerry's persistence is its own form of resilience. Fact 247. The show's villains tend to be parodies of recognizable archetypes rather than straightforwardly evil entities. The Galactic Federation is a parody of bureaucratic empire. The Citadel Ricks are a parody of technocratic meritocracy. Rick Prime is a parody of pure self-interest taken to its logical extreme. The choice to satirize systems rather than individuals reflects the show's tendency to locate evil in structure rather than in individual malice. Fact 248. Rick's blue hair is a design choice with no canonical explanation offered by the show. It is simply part of who he looks like. Fan theories about the hair being the result of exposure to radiation or chemical processes abound, but the show has never confirmed any explanation. Sometimes a design choice is just a design choice. Fact 249. The show's relationship with nihilism is more complicated than a surface reading suggests. Rick is a nihilist who keeps showing up, who keeps saving people he claims not to care about, who builds things and invents things and explores things despite insisting it all means nothing. His nihilism is a shield, as Dr. Wong observes, not a philosophy he has actually lived all the way through. The show uses this to argue that a fully committed nihilist would stop. Rick hasn't stopped. Fact 250. The Smith family home address has been referenced inconsistently across the show's run, as being in the fictional city of Seattle, Washington. The choice of Seattle, a city associated with both tech industry wealth and artistic counterculture, seems appropriate for a family where one member has access to the entire multiverse, while the rest of them struggle with suburban anxiety. Fact 251. Rick's catchphrase, "Wubba lubba dub dub," was used prominently in early seasons but appeared less frequently as the show matured. This reduction tracked with the show's general movement away from catchphrase comedy toward more character-grounded humor as the writers became more confident in what the show could do without relying on those kind of props. Fact 252. The Galactic Federation prison dimension that Rick is confined in during the Season 2 finale is notable for its detail. Prisoners are assigned jobs, given living quarters, and appear to maintain a functioning social community. Rick's presence disrupts this equilibrium immediately. Even in a maximum security interdimensional prison, Rick is approximately 14 minutes from being the most powerful person in the room. Fact 253. In the Season 4 episode, Edge of Morty, Rick Die Rick Pete, Morty encounters a death crystal that shows him visions of possible futures. The future he keeps working toward is a future in which he dies next to Jessica. The show uses this to say something about how human longing for connection can override survival instinct, even in someone with Morty's experience. Fact 254. The concept of clones and duplicate selves appears repeatedly across the show, and always raises the same underlying questions. Which version is real? Which version has the right to the life in question? And whether being a copy diminishes any of the experiences you have had. The show never settles these questions, but finds them endlessly generative as dramatic and comedic material. Fact 255. Rick's complete vocabulary includes invented words, alien terminology, scientific jargon, and informal American English, all deployed with remarkable consistency. The writers maintain a kind of internal Rick voice guide that ensures he uses language the same way across episodes, regardless of which writers are responsible for individual scripts. This consistency of voice is part of what makes the character feel like a real person rather than a collection of traits. Fact 256. The show has a recurring interest in the question of what makes a person the same person across time. Morty, who has deleted memories, is not quite the same Morty who made those memories. Beth, who chose to stay, is not quite the same Beth who chose to go. Rick, who killed Rick Prime, is not quite the same Rick who spent decades hunting him. These quiet transformations accumulate into a show that is more interested in identity than its comic surface suggests. Fact 257. Season 5's Mr. Nimbus episode is also notable for its treatment of Rick and Beth's relationship dynamic. Mr. Nimbus, as Rick's arch-nemesis, forces Rick into a vulnerability he doesn't display around his family. The episode uses the presence of an external party who knows Rick's history to reveal things about Rick that his family doesn't have context to see. Fact 258. The show's willingness to introduce and then kill major characters without warning is part of what maintains its sense of genuine stakes. Viewers of Rick and Morty cannot fully trust that a character who matters will survive an episode. This narrative unpredictability, deployed carefully enough that it is alarming rather than numbing, is one of the show's most reliable tools for maintaining tension. Fact 259. Summer's arc in Seasons 7 and 8 demonstrates the show's ongoing commitment to giving each member of the Smith family their own distinct perspective on the events they share. Summer's Season 8 premiere episode, Summer of All Fears, places her at the center of the narrative in a way that recalls how far she's come from the background figure of early seasons. Fact 260. Jerry's moment in Season 4, where he is shown surviving on an alien planet through sheer stubbornness and accidental competence, is one of the show's most generous gestures toward a character it usually treats as a punching bag. Jerry doesn't have Rick's genius or Summer's adaptability or Morty's cosmic importance, but he survives, and sometimes the show seems to suggest that is enough. Part 10. The final 30 closing facts and a last thought. Fact 261. Rick and Morty has spawned a multiverse of non-canonical content, including claymation shorts, anime shorts, mobile games, virtual reality experiences, comic book series, prose books, and now a full anime spin-off series. The property's expansion into these formats reflects both the commercial success of the main show and the genuine creative interest in exploring the universe from different angles. Fact 262. The Rotten Tomatoes score of 90% across the show's run, maintained through cast changes and creative transitions, suggests a level of baseline quality that very few long-running shows achieve. Many shows see their critical standing erode over time. Rick and Morty's has held, a testament to the consistency of the writing operation that Harmon and Martyr have maintained. Fact 263. Dan Harmon's Story Circle, the narrative framework he developed and applied to both Community and Rick and Morty, has been taught in screenwriting courses and discussed in entertainment journalism as an example of a working structural theory. Its application to the Rick and Morty episode format, where the circle needs to complete within 22 minutes while also accommodating improvisation and chaos, is part of why episodes feel simultaneously structured and alive. Fact 264. Rick and Morty holds a 9 out of 10 user rating on IMDb, based on tens of thousands of reviews. User reviews frequently cite the show's dark humor, science fiction premises, and philosophical depth as distinguishing factors, alongside criticism in later seasons for perceived inconsistency in quality. Fact 265. The show's influence on how adult animation is pitched and commissioned at American networks is difficult to overstate. Before Rick and Morty proved there was an enormous audience for genre-inflected, philosophically engaged animated comedy, networks were cautious about committing to expensive animated projects with complex mythologies. The show changed that calculus. Fact 266. Rick Sanchez's design has become one of the most recognized character silhouettes in contemporary American animation. The lab coat, the wild hair, the slightly stooped posture, the drink in hand. These elements combine into an immediately recognizable image that has been reproduced on merchandise, in fan art, and in cultural contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. Fact 267. The character of Morty has been cited in commentary about how animated shows can maintain emotional authenticity through visual simplicity. Morty's face is not expressively complex by animation standards. Yet, through a combination of voice performance, timing, and the situations the writers put him in, He generates more emotional response per frame than characters in shows with far more detailed designs. Fact 268. The show's most discussed philosophical themes: nihilism, the nature of identity, the ethics of power, the meaning of family, and whether anything matters in an infinite universe, are not presented as things with answers. The show asks them, and then gets on with the adventure. This restraint, refusing to resolve what it raises, gives the show a kind of intellectual honesty that pedantic philosophical allegory lacks. Fact 269. Bird Person's wedding remains, for many viewers, the single most emotionally effective moment in the show's run. Not the most plot significant, not the most philosophically dense, but the most felt. The combination of celebration and sudden catastrophe, the speed of the shift from happiness to horror, and the specific loss it inflicts on Rick, whose only truly loyal friend is taken from him in the moment that should have been a celebration, is a kind of storytelling that the show rarely attempts and executes perfectly when it does. Fact 270. Rick's interactions with the president, played by Keith David, represent a recurring comedic thread where the show deflates political power through comparison. The President of the United States is, in Rick's universe, a figure of modest capability who occasionally requires Rick's help and is never quite sure what to do with that dependency. The show uses this dynamic to observe something about the relationship between actual capability and institutional authority. Fact 271. The show's post-season 6 expansion of the cast, to include a formal Spacebeth character in the main ensemble, reflects a structural confidence the show developed over time. In earlier seasons, introducing a permanent duplicate of a main character might have been resolved or explained away. The show instead kept both Beths and committed to the dramatic complications that creates. Fact 272. Jerry's friendship with Krombopulos Michael, the assassin who appears briefly in Season 2 and who Morty accidentally kills, demonstrates the show's willingness to use Jerry's sweetness as an unexpected source of genuine feeling. Jerry doesn't know what Krombopulos Michael does for a living. He just knows he's friendly and easy to be around. The show uses this to observe that kindness, uncomplicated by information, can form bonds across enormous ethical gaps. Fact 273. The phrase, "nobody exists on purpose," "nobody belongs anywhere," "everybody's gonna die," "come watch TV," delivered by Morty to Summer in 60 Minutes, is one of the most quoted lines from the show. It operates simultaneously as nihilism and as comfort, pointing toward the same conclusion from two completely different emotional directions. It is the show's most precise expression of how existential horror and human warmth can occupy the same space. Fact 274. Rick's ability to improvise solutions in real time is one of his defining characteristics and reflects a genuine scientific disposition. The ability to recognize the applicable principle in a novel situation and apply it faster than anyone else. This is different from knowledge. Knowledge tells you what has worked before. Rick's kind of intelligence tells him what should work right now, in this specific situation, which has never happened before and probably never will again. Fact 275. The show's treatment of alcohol as a constant element of Rick's life has occasionally been discussed in terms of real addiction narratives. While the show mostly treats Rick's drinking as a personality trait rather than a medical condition, later seasons have been more explicit about connecting it to his grief, his avoidance, and his inability to simply exist in the present moment without chemical mediation. Fact 276. Season 8 concluded on the 27th of July, 2025. The final episode of the season is titled Hot Rick. Season 9 will arrive approximately 10 months later, in May 2026. Between now and that premiere, the show exists in that particular suspended state it has inhabited between seasons many times before. Complete, but not finished. Concluded, but not over. The characters somewhere out in the multiverse doing things we can't see yet. Fact 277. The collaboration between Dan Harmon and Scott Marder as showrunners from Season 5 onward has produced some of the most consistently structured seasons of the show's run. Marder, who joined the show as a writer in Season 3, has described his approach as trying to give each season both silly standalone episodes and meaningful canonical development, a balance that the earlier, more chaotic seasons sometimes struggled to maintain. Fact 278. The show's renewed commitment through Season 12 confirmed in 2024, means Rick and Morty will be one of the longest-running adult animated programs in American television history if it reaches that goal. It will be in the company of shows like The Simpsons, South Park, and Family Guy, as series that have generated over a decade of episodes, a genuinely rare distinction. Fact 279. Rick's lab coat was specifically chosen as his defining garment for both the immediate visual identification it provides and the statement it makes about how he sees himself. There is no version of Rick that is off-duty or relaxed. The lab coat is his armor, his identity, his perpetual declaration that he is a scientist first and everything else second. Fact 280. The show's depiction of grief, loss, and trauma is one of the things that distinguishes it from shows that use similar premises purely for adventure comedy. Rick has lost people. Morty has been through experiences that leave marks. The show allows those losses to accumulate rather than resetting them. The characters remember what has happened to them. They carry it. Fact 281. Rick's relationship with Bird Person, as the show has revealed it through flashback and backstory, was formed in the context of genuine shared struggle. They fought a war together against the Galactic Federation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and operating from a position of genuine danger. That kind of bond, formed under life-and-death conditions, carries a different quality than most friendships the show depicts. Fact 282. The show's recurring use of post-credit scenes as storytelling devices allows the writers to deepen episodes without extending their running time. The post-credit scene after the Rick Shank redemption, showing Rick's monologue about the Szechuan sauce, is one of the most famous examples, but dozens of episodes across the show's run use the space after the credits to add a final layer of meaning, comedy, or consequence. Fact 283. Rick and Morty has been broadcast in multiple countries through various networks and streaming services, giving it a genuinely global audience. In the United Kingdom, the show airs on E4. In Canada, it premiered on Adult Swim Canada. In various territories across Europe and Asia, it is available through streaming services including Netflix and local equivalents. The show's humor, which draws heavily on American and science fiction cultural references, translates remarkably well across cultural contexts. Fact 284. The show's fan community has produced analysis at levels of depth that rival academic criticism. Fan essays examining the philosophy of Rick's nihilism, the psychological accuracy of Morty's PTSD symptoms, the political economy of the Citadel's social structure, and the gender dynamics of the Smith family have circulated widely and informed how many viewers understand what they're watching. Fact 285. Summer's character was noted to have grown in popularity across the show's run, to the point where she is now considered a primary character rather than a supporting one by many viewers. Her Season 8 premiere episode, placing her name in the title, acknowledges this evolution formally. Fact 286. The character of Jaguar, the assassin who appears in Morty Night Run and forms an unexpected partnership with Morty, was clearly designed as a parody of action movie characters played by actors like Antonio Banderas. He speaks in dramatic non-sequiturs and moves with choreographed intensity through situations that don't quite require it. He is the show commenting on the conventions of action cinema through a single magnificently over-designed character. Fact 287. Rick and Morty's engagement with the concept of free will runs through many of its storylines without ever being stated directly. The predestination implied by Rick's ability to see multiple timelines, the determinism suggested by the many worlds framework, the question of whether any of the show's characters are making genuinely free choices in a universe governed by physics. These themes float beneath the surface of episodes that are, on their face, about pickle transformations and sauce. Fact 288. The show's implication that Rick C-137 created the Citadel of Ricks at some point in his history as part of the infrastructure of portal technology is one of the most consequential pieces of backstory in the show. It means Rick is responsible for the institution he most despises. He built the thing he spends his life resisting. This is not presented as irony so much as tragedy. The things we make in moments of need can outlast and turn against the need that created them. Fact 289. Jerry's survival of multiple apocalyptic and near-apocalyptic events throughout the show's run has been noted by fans as something quietly extraordinary. The universe that kills Bird Person, that Cronenberg's entire dimensions, that erases people from every possible reality simultaneously, has repeatedly failed to kill Jerry Smith of the Prime Dimension. There might be a joke in there. There might also be something the show is saying quietly about the stubbornness of ordinary people. Fact 290. Rick and Morty has become one of the defining cultural objects of the 2010s and early 2020s, in the same way that The Simpsons defined the 1990s or South Park shaped the 2000s. Its particular combination of accessible absurdism and genuine philosophical weight gave a generation of young adults a language for talking about consciousness, meaning, and family that they didn't have before. Part 11. The last 10. We're nearly there now. Just 10 more facts, and then the silence can have you back. Fact 291. Rick and Morty exists at the intersection of several creative traditions: the irreverent comedy of Adult Swim, the science fiction tradition of thinking seriously about big ideas through strange situations, the character-driven drama of prestige television, and the improvisational energy of stand-up comedy. The show is impossible to place fully in any one tradition, which is partly why it found an audience that other shows couldn't. Fact 292. The show's use of improvisation in voice recording, pioneered by Roiland and continued in different forms after his departure, distinguishes it from most animated programs. The willingness to let characters meander, contradict themselves, and surprise even the writers in the recording booth produces a texture of aliveness that scripted dialogue alone rarely achieves. Fact 293. Rick's genuine love for scientific discovery, separate from any practical application, is visible throughout the show, in moments where he encounters something genuinely new and his arrogance gives way to something that looks a lot like wonder. These moments are brief, but they suggest that underneath the nihilism and the alcoholism and the arrogance, Rick Sanchez still finds the universe astonishing. He would be furious if you pointed that out. Fact 294. Morty's journey from the terrified, reluctant sidekick of Season 1 to the increasingly capable, morally sophisticated young person of Season 8 constitutes one of the most sustained character arcs in animated television history. He is not the same person he was. The show has earned that development through a decade of accumulated experience that it never erased. Fact 295. The show began as two people riffing on a juvenile parody of Back to the Future in a film festival. It became something that has won Emmy Awards, inspired academic books, reshaped a genre, generated one of the most devoted fan communities in entertainment, and produced a mythology complex enough to require a dedicated wiki maintained by thousands of contributors worldwide. That arc, from crude improv to cultural institution, is as strange and improbable as anything in Rick's garage. Fact 296. Dan Harmon has said, in various interviews, that Rick and Morty is partly about asking whether it is possible to be the smartest person in the room and the loneliest person in the room at the same time, and whether that is a tragedy or a choice. The show has never fully answered that question. It returns to it every few episodes and then puts it down again. It may not be answerable. That is possibly the point. Fact 297. The show's ability to be genuinely funny and genuinely sad at the same moment, sometimes in the same line, is its rarest quality. Most shows are one or the other. The very best moments in Rick and Morty are when you laugh and immediately feel slightly bad about laughing, or when you're surprised by grief in the middle of a bit. That simultaneity is hard to produce, and the show does it regularly enough to seem effortless. Fact 298. As of Season 9's confirmed May 2026 premiere, Rick and Morty is approximately at the midpoint of its confirmed run through Season 12. Half the remaining story is still ahead. Whatever happened in Season 8 is groundwork. The most emotionally significant moments, the truest surprises, the largest consequences, they may not have happened yet. Fact 299. The central relationship of the show, the improbable, complicated, frequently painful, undeniably real connection between a brilliant old man who refuses to admit he cares about anything and a scared young person who refuses to stop caring about everything, is one of the most original family dynamics in the history of animated television. It doesn't have a name, not quite grandfather and grandson, not quite mentor and student, not quite partners, not quite the thing Rick would ever call it. It is its own thing, and it is the heart of everything the show has ever done. Fact 300. Rick and Morty began as an idea in a room full of people watching short films and deciding what was worth keeping. It became a show. It became a franchise. It became a meme factory and an Emmy winner and a philosophical text and a consumer product and a community. It became, for a lot of people, the show they put on when the day has been hard and they need something loud and funny and occasionally devastating to sit with in the dark. It earned all of those things, slowly, over a decade, one episode at a time. That process, accumulation made into something that matters, is not so different from the way most worthwhile things get built.